morning, everyone. Marco, good morning. Such a pleasure to have this opportunity to talk to you. The first thing I want to do is to thank South Summit for making this possible.
Thank you very much, Maria Eugenia, and good morning to everyone. Really, really a pleasure to be here with you.
But you know, we have quite a bit of a challenge. In 20 minutes, sharing with all of these people what are the challenges and the opportunities. We are in such a perfect storm, this combination of climate change, biodiversity loss, ocean depletion, growing inequality, so many things going on at the same time that we'll need to focus. And this is why I would invite you that we start focusing this conversation on biodiversity loss, also because some other panels and some other speakers are going to go very deep into the net zero and climate change. But if we talk about biodiversity, first question is, let's have some data, but then the second question is, why do we care?
Well, thank you, Maria Eugenia. And again, congratulations to South Summit, and thank you so much for including biodiversity in this conversation. So that's exactly the right question to start with, Maria Eugenia, because I think something new has happened quite recently. And that is that the evidence of the impact of our activities on the planet, and particularly on climate, but also on biodiversity, has never been clearer. And so today we really understand that impact, but also, perhaps more importantly, we're understanding the consequences that the impact is having, not just on the natural world, but also on our lives, our economy, our society, our health, as COVID has painfully demonstrated to us. So the figures are actually quite dramatic. We're talking about 1 million species threatened with extinction. We're talking about 2/3 of global decline in wildlife populations. Imagine if you put together all the weight, the biomass of people and our domesticated animals on land, that biomass will account for 96% of all the living beings on land. Only 100 years ago, that was exactly the opposite. So we are having a deep impact on the biosphere, on the biodiversity, on the composition of life on Earth. And that comes with consequences. Because when you think about biodiversity, until now, we've been thinking about the moral duty to coexist with the amazing diversity of life on the planet. And we think about elephants and tigers, and rhinos, polar bears, whales. Actually, biodiversity is much more than that. Biodiversity is the fish that we eat, is the pollinators that produce our food, is the forest that regulate water and combat climate change. So we're beginning to understand that actually we depend on nature much more than nature depends on us. And the consequences of losing nature are painful, costly, and actually intolerable in the long term. So this is a cultural revolution, Maria Eugenia, and I think that's an exciting dimension. The exciting part of today is that we know and we're beginning to understand we can't continue to destroy nature the way we did until now.
You know, the way I think about biodiversity is like diversifying your portfolio of investments. It gives you resilience. So this is why we need this biodiversity. We need nature to be resilient, especially now that we need to face climate change. And what we have been doing up to now, and in the report that you publish every year, you show how we are eating into our capital, which is the planet, instead of living out of the interest, which is what we should do as smart citizens. But you know, having said this, when we think of targets, we have very hard targets to address climate change. We have this net zero in Europe, 2050. We have the Fit for 55 by 2030. Do we have these targets for biodiversity? How are we going to address this issue?
That's a super important point. And in fact, this is exactly what we are working on right now. And I'm talking about not just WWF, but the whole environmental movement and the business and also governments as well, because we're discussing exactly the idea of creating a global goal and the global set of targets for nature and to be agreed next year at the convention of the UN in China, Kunming, as we did for climate. South Summit is a convention, is a summit, is a forum on innovation. And think about the disruption that the global goal for climate, the 1.5 degree and the net zero goal, the disruption that it created in the energy sector by sending a clear message to the market, to the business, to the consumers, that business as usual based on fossil fuel was not an option anymore. We had to shift. That disruption has helped create new technologies, new approaches, new financing, and that's happening. We can say for sure we're not moving fast enough, but we are moving towards a renewable energy based society. Now, we need to see the same happening vis-a-vis biodiversity. We need a global goal for nature that is as disruptive vis-a-vis other economic sectors that are driving nature loss. Agriculture, fishing, infrastructure, mining, forest. These are the top 5 categories that actually are driving nature loss today. And of course, the financial flows they need to redirect, repurpose, and support these transitions. So we are suggesting that together with net zero, as you've seen in the video, we need to embrace a global goal for nature, net positive, nature positive by 2030. Science is telling us this is necessary. And it is possible by a combination of regulation, by a combination of incentives, by a combination of new innovation and technology. And if you look at the subsidies that today go to agriculture, to fisheries, to forestry, in the hundreds of billions per year, the government are giving to these sectors to maintain their operations as they are today. Chemical agriculture, an agriculture that destroys the soil, an agriculture that pollutes the water, and a forestry that is not sustainable, and a fishing that drives overfishing. Well, imagine those hundreds of billions of dollars redirected towards ecological agriculture, organic agriculture, towards sustainable fishing and sustainable infrastructure and mining and so on and so forth. All that translate into sustainable practices. That's what we need to see. But in order to do that, we need to embrace business, governments, consumers, a clear direction, global goal for nature, 2030, by 2030 be net positive, as we have embraced the global goal for climate.
Thank you for that, because that really gives us hope. We really know how to do it. It's a combination of regulation, it's a combination of transparency. We also need the technology and innovation, and we also need the financial flow for this problem. So, we are involved with these 2 organizations that are working to improve biodiversity. In the case of Oceana, it is the oceans. Let's talk a bit about our goals. No? How do you define the goals for WWF? And I know we share some of those, and let me address the goal for traceability and transparency enforcement that makes such a difference, because traceability and transparency is good for consumers so that everyone knows what they are getting. It's good for employees. So in the case of fisheries, we know there's slavery going on. It's good for the fishes because we avoid overfishing and bad practices, but it's also good for the taxpayers if we think that we still have subsidies going into industries that are polluting and not behaving well. So for us, this is one of our main goals, and I know in this space we share common goals. What would be some of the goals of your organization?
Well, listen, I think more than a goal for each of our organizations, we need to start talking about goals for everyone, universal goals that are embraced by everybody. And as I said earlier, this is not anymore a kind of perspective, a point of view. This is science talking. We need to transition to practices in key economic sectors, from energy and climate, but also on agriculture, fishing, etc., on biodiversity, that are developing and producing growth, because we still have to address huge economic inequality in the world, but without affecting the environment. Until now, we've been taking nature for granted. We need to move away from that mindset and embrace a true a sustainable approach. So we basically, we have to, first of all, protect more. We have to protect what's left on the planet. We can't afford to destroy any more natural environment that's so important for the stability of the whole ecosystem, the biosphere. And so there is a goal and a target of 30% of protection on land and sea, as you know very well, that the governments are beginning to embrace, which is exciting, because it will, and right now we are only protecting 50% of land, less than 10% on the ocean. So we need to increase protection. But perhaps even more important is to sustainably manage the rest. And so that's why the public finances, the private investment should all begin to shift towards supporting nature positive practices, practices that are actually leaving more nature, not less. And that's possible. It's possible in all these sectors, but it's just the question of adopting the right technology, the right behaviors. And let me also say a word about traceability and transparency. That's absolutely critical, because that's how you create accountability in the system. And so once we have a global goal agreed, and we have the right way to monitor and to create accountability, then I think everybody will be part of the same effort. And from a business and government perspective, we all see that particularly the younger generation are demanding a new way of developing economy, are demanding a way that is de-risking their future. Effectively, right now we are developing our present, jeopardizing the future and the future of our children. That's unacceptable morally, ethically, is unsustainable from a business economic perspective. That's what the young people are asking. That's what increasingly the consumers are moving towards, buying products and supporting companies and businesses that are sustainable for the life on Earth in totality, but frankly, increasingly for our own future. And that's the big transformation, cultural transformation in the last few years. We are worried now about losing nature. We are not just sad. It's not just a moral issue. It's actually a survival issue.
Completely. And as we are here in this innovation summit, and with most of the people here who are listening to us, entrepreneurs and innovators, what are some of the answers that we can find in technology and innovation, specifically addressing this problem of transparency and traceability? And I can share the very good experience of Oceana teaming up with SkyTruth and Google to develop a platform, an open platform that you know very well, Global Fishing Watch, so that anyone here, anyone can go there and have a supervisory role into where shipping boats are going, whether they are going into marine protected areas where they are not supposed to go. And this ability to monitor and enforce legislation is thanks to innovation. And there are very many opportunities for for the people with us here today to help us achieve this traceability and transparency.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said earlier, innovation. One of the reasons I was so keen to be part of this forum is because it's a focus on innovation, and innovation is going to be a major solution, part of the solution for our sustainability challenge. Let's be honest. We innovate every day, right? We take, when we take a different decision, even in our private life. So innovation is actually a human trait. The question is to support and incentivize innovation and direct innovation, if you like. So innovation can be supported by incentives, can be supported by regulation. In fact, somebody, remembering another panel, said something that struck me, which is probably true. When regulation comes in, that basically give a push to the old business model, then opens the door to innovation. And so in a way, there is a strong role of regulation to support new directions. Mm. And again, the example of renewable energy is a classic one. But I have in WWF the same experience like you have, Maria Eugenia, about working with so many startups and companies that actually, whatever they do, they are beginning to have, there is a constant element now in the innovation kind of the world. The desire to produce new ideas, to have new business models, but also to be more sustainable and contribute to society and to our future. And that's brilliant. You know, whether it is new polymers coming from seaweeds that will replace oil-based plastic, or whether it is, you know, a blockchain, I heard it before, blockchain, that could actually trace commodities, fish from the boat down to the supermarkets or other commodities. All that innovation is going to be fundamental to contribute to a sustainable agenda.
Thank you for mentioning plastics. We should not forget that all of this plastic going into the ocean, is going into the fish, is going into our stomachs. And with the development of e-commerce, we need to be out there, you know, asking all of these e-commerce to give us the option as consumers to not to have plastic, to have plastic-free options. But of course, innovation in this field to develop packaging that performs but can substitute plastic is something that we need very badly and very urgently.
Totally, and again, let me go back to the importance also of having a global goal and a regulation that help us drive towards that global goal. There is now a discussion which is going to start in February, very important, about actually adopting a global treaty on plastic pollution, a treaty that will actually set targets for reduction because we are using too much plastic, for increasing recycling through design of products and through infrastructure, because we are just recycling less than 10% globally, which is unacceptable, and also to invest in new alternatives. That's really, I think, the future more than anything else. We got to move away from fossil fuel plastic. And let's remember, plastic is not just going into the ocean and choking rivers and affecting all life on Earth. Is actually also generating a lot of CO2 in the process of being produced, and is still keeping alive the fossil fuel industry. $400 billion plans for $400 billion investments are right now being discussed by the big oil and the petrochemical sector in new plastic infrastructure and production structures. So, I mean, you know, that can be the future. We have to move to new alternatives, and that's where innovation can really help, but needs to be supported by incentives, by regulation, by a global direction, clear direction, where we all embrace.
Totally. We need to close the faucet here. We have a few seconds now to finish, and I think maybe a good message, as we are also, or probably the people listening to us already, climate change is something that it's understood, that they get to understand the relationship between climate change and the loss of biodiversity, how having biodiversity is part of the solution, how we need forests, how we need healthy oceans to absorb CO2, and also how climate change and the increase in temperatures is contributing to this loss of biodiversity.
Well, absolutely, and so we call it the twin challenge: climate change and nature loss. On climate change, you know, we're taking climate for granted. We're taking nature for granted. Now we need to stop doing that. On climate change, the impact is more visible because we feel it. It's hot. It's wet. Floods, destruction, wind. So, you know, climate change, we really feel it, and so the awareness about the impact of climate change is much higher until now. But we're beginning to understand that if you lose the fishes in the water, if you lose the fishes in our rivers, if we destroy forests, we are going to lose. It is as dangerous as climate change, and there is no way we can address climate change without protecting forests, without protecting the ocean. As you say, 50% of the heat generated, the global warming has been absorbed until now by the ocean. That won't go ahead. This has been a major mitigation contribution of the ocean. Forests, they are storing billions of tons of carbon, and we're burning them and releasing that in the atmosphere on top of our own industrial, house, and transport emissions. So protecting nature actually accounts for, at least science is telling us, for at least 30% of the solution to climate change. And by protecting nature, we contribute both to climate change and also to water security, food security, and to the stability of the ecosystem that our society, depend on. So it's tough, I have to say. You know, if you look at the figures, all the indicators of the health of the planet are still going in the wrong direction. Very few cases where we're beginning to bend the curve of nature loss. But the great thing is that now we know what the problem is, we understand where we need to get to, and so we need to focus on the transition, on the pathway to a sustainable future. And I have to say, I was a member of the WWF when I was 12 years old, and I've never been more excited and in a funny way optimistic than today, exactly because of this big awareness that is growing, and we're beginning to see response to follow as well. But we count on all the innovators in this room and in this forum to contribute to that agenda too.
We need them engaged. Thank you very much. We're coming to the end of our conversation. It's good that we could have this virtual conversation and that we didn't have to contribute to CO2 emissions by going anywhere. And thank you very much. It was a real pleasure, and I hope we have left some key ideas with the people listening to us and more ready to understand how, by saving nature, we are saving ourselves.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Eugenia. Very, very nice to meet you.
Thank you.